Hi, and welcome to the Atvance Intellect community channel. This is the channel that hopefully brings you information all around cybersecurity, data analytics, and our new edition, data privacy. This is the third in our series, and I want to welcome Brendon Ambrose to our series. The purpose of today is really to give you a deep dive into our privacy division and help you understand what that means for you, our customers. Brendon, welcome to the series.
Hi, Jason. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
No worries, no worries. The aim of this series at the end of the day is to really ensure that we talk to the community that we share our information with, but then at the same time help them understand how we're practically looking at some of the challenges they face in the area of data analytics, cybersecurity, and privacy. So I think let's kick this off. Let's start off with a little bit of your background. How did you end up here, and what do you see happening over the next couple months?
Cool. So, I think that's a great place to start, and that it sort of gives a bit of context as to why we're doing what we're doing, right?
Yep.
So I'm the general manager of the data privacy division, and I'm an attorney who practiced in data privacy and intellectual property law for a while. I then went to one of the big four consulting firms and was their DPO for the Africa region for a period. And when I wasn't their DPO, I was the DPO. The DPO was either reporting to me or I was assisting them from a legal point of view. And where I noticed there was a bit of a gap was in the communication between the various departments within the data privacy realm, right?
Yeah.
Because data privacy is as much a cultural aspect of compliance as it is a technical aspect of compliance, meaning that it's one of those things that you hope your staff will just have an innate or sort of base knowledge of, and it'll cross from IT through to information security, through to legal, through to compliance, through to risk, depending if you have all those organizations, all those departments within your business. And I noticed that there's no one that serves the function of the data privacy officer or the legal function of data privacy at a holistic level, right? There's software vendors, and there's software developers, and there's software resellers, and there are analytics guys, and there are data privacy lawyers. All of them do actually pretty decent work, but none of them bring that all together, which is why when we initially spoke about me joining Atvance, it really excited me, because it's something that, as a DPO, it answers all your questions at multiple levels. Yeah. And for instance, I always think data privacy impact assessments are the most useful tool, but an incredibly administrative job. So, our discussion a while back was, how can you automate that? Can you automate that? Is that something you want to do in your organization? Now, it's dependent for each organization, but the option that could actually be done was just such a cool idea for me, because it's not something that you could get from traditional law firms. And more respect to them. I think a lot of them do a very good job, but it's not something that their way of thinking enables.
Yeah.
And for me, that's something which I think is really, really important, especially in an era of compliance, or an era of compliance where we are now, where it's incredibly complex, but not insurmountable. And
agreed.
I find, there's a lot of sales talk out around saying, this is the world's most complex area of law and complex area of compliance, and you need 15,000 pieces of software and 800 legal advisors in order to just get you across the line. Which, if you're a 300,000 person organization, probably. But if you're not, there's far better ways to handle this, and there's ways to bring business value out of your data protection program, out of your data protection regimes, as opposed to making it purely a risk mitigating project.
And I think that comes back to the point that we know that's happening inside of organizations. We're seeing a lot of these subdivisions, or what we would term back in the day as silos, where they would operate in their own silo, now starting to pull together, right? Because I think it's all about the data, and I know we'll get into that. But, from a cyber perspective, from a data analytics perspective, the one key area that definitely spans across is the legal and the privacy side of things. And I'll be honest, from a cyber perspective, we've seen more and more of our conversations heading to the risk managers, and then lo and behold, there's this single solitary guy or lady in the business who happens to be the DPO, right? Which, funny enough, they have to lend some bit of information to, but and then they disappear back into the ether. I mean, do you see that kind of engagement changing as the likes of POPI and GDPR, and there's a whole bunch of other regulations become quite onerous?
Absolutely. I mean, look, I think what we do is not break down silos. What we do is talk to each individual silo. We're not a strategy consultant who's going to come in and tell you how to change your entire culture within your organization. I mean, I think that's a very brave place to be. I think it's a very difficult place to be. But the languages you have to speak in order to get the most value out of data privacy compliance is many. I mean, you have to speak the language of cybersecurity, you have to speak the legal language, you have to speak compliance, you have to speak risk. There's a whole bunch of understandings that you need to have in order to answer your problem, answer this complex problem of data privacy in a way that doesn't just make you compliant, which is very important, and you do need to get there, right? And that is a challenge in and of itself. It doesn't just make you compliant, but it goes, well, now we've identified all of this data that we have, we've made it compliant, but we're hosting it. So is there a way that we can get the most value out of it while still remaining compliant? Yes. And it's those sort of questions which, we try and, we between you, myself, and Sean, we try and get to grips with clients to see this is not just a question of compliance. This is a question of value, right? If you have to do something because you're legislatively obliged in terms of the GDPR or the POPIA, you have to do it, right? But while you're doing it, you may as well have a look and see if you can actually get far more out of it than just the simple cost that you're spending to actually become compliant. Yes. And that I see as a great opportunity for businesses right now.
Agreed. Well, I think that reminds one of the phrases that we have in our internal strategy, right? We talk about the power of three. And I mean, can you elaborate a little bit on how you see the power of three, advantaging our customers and the community that we interact with?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, you and I have worked and are working closer together pretty much every day. And that's probably a good place to start, right? So the power of three is the synergy between our three departments. It's something that we don't believe any other consulting firm offers. It's something that we take as quite a unique selling proposition of ours, where you can come in at a level of data privacy compliance. We can create your framework. We can develop your policies. We can put in place standard operating procedures. We can hopefully automate your privacy impact assessments. From there, we can, once we've identified all of that, we can use that data that we've identified in a fashion that's compliant with the law to get you the most value out of that through our analytics department. Now, we can also, through your division, as you know, say, well, okay, well, now we've identified that you're using this data in this way, you're managing it here, and you're fitting in within this framework, but the DPO is working 17 hours a day. Is there a way that the DPO can automate some of their roles? And that from a data security point of view is really, really powerful, because it says, well, okay, you're automating what you can automate, which is not saying to automate everything. And I think that's a common myth that most compliance roles can be automated, and they can't, right? Because each organization is so different and so varied that you can automate certain things. And I think that's what we do is in terms of the power of three. We look at automation from a very pragmatic point of view, going, well, we're not selling hours and pushing fees, but we're looking at how we can get the best value for the client through each one of our three divisions, as opposed to trying to sell the most consulting work, or trying to sell the most software, or trying to sell the most AI work. It's using the synergy between the three departments, you actually get true value as a client. And for me, that's really important, right? Because as we've discussed a lot, our goal is to be the most trusted advisor to clients, whether or not it's simply creating a data privacy program, or whether it's implementing a certain piece of cybersecurity software within that data privacy program, right? We don't want, I mean, for me at least, we don't want clients to be concerned that we're essentially, I always use the phrase, we're selling timeshare. It's never a hard sell, because it's it's something that I've always wanted clients to come at a trusted level, to know that they're getting proper value and that the money that they're spending has a direct result, and that they can respond and they can manage their internal stakeholders and show that direct result. Yeah. So it's always very client-centric. It's very focused on what our clients' outputs are internally and how they manage their stakeholders internally and how they manage their own role internally. It's very different if you have a client who has an analytics department with a whole bunch of actuaries and data scientists to a client who doesn't. If they don't have that, is there a conversation that needs to be had with the analytics department? Maybe, but probably not, because it's not somewhere that they're looking. So they're at the infancy. But if they do have that, then the analytics department need to be fully involved. Yeah. From a cybersecurity point of view, if the client's got 50 laptops, they don't need a full cybersecurity framework and program. There's ways we can work together to put in something very simple and robust. Yeah. As opposed to a client who's got 500 laptops. Well, now we need to start looking at full data retention programs, and there's different scalabilities for different clients, and it's those sort of conversations which I like having. I know you do as well. Yeah. And there's no one else that can have it at that level, at the true legal compliance, technical and analytical level that gives clients that value. And that's what I was saying about speaking to each department in their own language.
Well, and I think you highlighted, like you're saying, we've had a couple of engagements. I think one of the engagements that stood out for me where you really made a lot of practical sense was a client that had just received a third-party risk assessment from a blue chip company, right? And that assessment, they're a three-man company or a three-lady company, whichever you see it. And they were expected to have a DPO. They were expected to have policies and frameworks. And I mean, it just didn't make sense no matter how, however, the stakeholders in that three-man company who provide quite an integral service to the organization. I mean, they were nervous, right? They were really concerned that this may affect their contract. I mean, and comes back to what you said. It's horses for courses. And I think this is what a lot of people don't recognize or know about the likes of POPI and GDPR. I mean, I don't know if you saw this, but, LinkedIn is my social media of choice. And I saw in fact, organizations I've never seen in my life before, branding some type of POPI program, some type of POPI engagement, and again, not all of it is bad, but I think, coming back to the point that you're saying, it's got to be practical and it's got to be, right for use, right?
It's got to make sense for the client. And I mean, I think it's very clear that all organizations, regardless of size, have to comply, but it's how you comply. Yeah. And it's how you make sure that you're adhering to the requirements of the GDPR or the POPIA or both, if you need to. Yeah. That's the discussion, which I find is very important. And that's the determination, which is important. So if you're a smaller client, going and filling your cart full with privacy software is probably not the way to go. Yeah. But if you're a bigger client, you probably do need a suite of software to make your compliance officers and your information officers and your legal officers' jobs far more manageable. And it allows them to report better and it allows them to get visibility of their risk better.
Agreed.
So it's that determination and it's that understanding of the role and that understanding of the technical ability of cybersecurity and of analytics to, not think that it's magic. I think it was... There's a cool quote about, when technology is not discernible from magic, then we are living in the future. I must actually find that quote. It's quite cool. But it's that understanding where I find if you don't have a proper technical understanding, you think that anything's possible with technology, or you think nothing's possible with technology. Yeah. There's not a realistic view. And that's where you and I work quite well together, where we know what we can do and we know the limits of technology. And I know the limits of human beings in those departments where you can't drive your DPO to work 25-hour days, which is or information officer to work 25-hour days. And I think that's happening more and more because there's a misunderstanding of how complex the role is, how administratively burdensome the role is, I mean, how much risk adheres to that role. So, it's not like you can just clock off and not worry about it. You worry about that 2 a.m. phone call of, we've had a massive data breach. How do we handle that? Yeah. Right? I mean, that's part of what we do is breach management, but it's really important to have that. And especially in our space, which I was talking about earlier, that trust relationship, because you're not going to trust someone who you don't have a good relationship with to manage your data breach and a confidential and proper manner. Because there might be regulatory reporting, there might be notification of data subjects. It's a very sensitive area. So that's where we really push is to build that relationship and to, be that most trusted advisor.
100%. And I think, again, I don't want to go too much down the rabbit hole, but there are some really great examples, good examples and bad examples, specifically in South Africa over the last 8 months, where organizations have been breached. And we know that Poppy is ideally not here right now, right? And it's something that people are working towards, and nobody has to disclose that. But what has been very interesting to watch in this breach management scenario is how organizations are communicating with their customers and their consumers. Is that something that you look at in your breach management strategy as to how organizations should be dealing with this effectively? Because we've seen some really, really bad examples by some really, really big customers, right?
Yeah. So one of the most often left out kids at the party when it comes to breach management is the marketing and PR department. And they've got a strategy on how to handle crisis comms. And this is part of that crisis comms community strategy, right? It needs to form part of that. It needs to be true to your organization's culture, true to your organization's morals and ethics. And, almost regardless of what the legislation says, you need to stay true to who you are as an organization. So you've got your bare basics of, the legislation says this, 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 and this. You need to comply with that. But then, you need to discuss with your marketing and PR teams. And if it's severe enough, there's companies who specialize in that sort of communication. And I've been involved in situations where we've had to bring them in before. And it's important. And it's important to have holding statements. It's important to have all of that aligns with the legislation, but also aligns, again, primarily with who you are as a company and who you want to be. Let's put it that way as well.
Exactly.
Always looking to be better.
And just a question, so with Poppy now coming out, and obviously, people have now got organizations have got almost 8-9 months to comply. How important do you think it is having a background in legal? Is it to engage with a client? One thing that we've seen is there's a lot of risk professionals out there consulting based on risk, right? And we get that because that's really policy based, and it's, how important do you think the legal aspect, and especially your background, would that value a client at the end of the day?
It's quite funny because my other degree is in risk management. So I think honestly, you do need a combination of sorts. Legal is very important, especially when it comes to interpretation of the legislation and real risk identification, because risk professionals are very important in taking into account what's happening. And I mean, or rather what can happen, and running those scenarios and figuring that out and putting in place the right processes in order to mitigate against those. And I mean, we work with a lot of risk professionals in order to do that.
Yeah.
Legal, on the other hand, aids that. Well, not on the other hand, actually, goes together. It aids that analysis. It aids that view, because if you've stood in front of a regulator, any regulator before, and had to argue your company's or your client's case, you get a sense of what they're going to ask you and what they're going to put you on the spot with. Yeah. And that's where I think having a trusted legal advisor does help in that space. But they need to work with, and I mean, I'm hoping that I work well with, and my team works well with, the risk and the technical guys, as we're talking about now with that synergy, right? You've got to have a sort of a multidisciplinary team in that space. Agreed.
So one of the things that I did enjoy, and we've been on eBiz Radio probably for the last, I think probably 4 or 5 months, really just sharing some of our stories and some of the latest things happening in data analytics, cyber, and privacy. But the one thing I did enjoy very much about your recording was, and you highlighted this very briefly, but I think it's important just to bring it back again, is you highlighted the aim at the end of the day is not to be selling thousands and thousands of hours of consulting, but really to try and figure out how you can empower the customer through consulting, legal and regulatory, as well as automating, right? Again, I know you touched on it briefly, but I mean, how do you see that playing? Because the one thing that I've definitely seen is that your DPO, well, again, is a multiple role in many organizations. So they'll have the ISO or the IT manager who happens to have a title /DPO, right? Or you'll have /CISO. So it's quite, we see a lot of these multiple roles in organizations. So how do you see that playing out in an organization, specifically around, how they manage this? Because most of the time when working with data privacy, automation doesn't really come into that conversation.
So, I mean, I make the joke that I'm always trying to work myself out of a job, right? Where we're not pushing consulting hours, and we're not pushing software sales, and we're not pushing product sales. We're again, and it sounds trite, but we're pushing value for the client at the end of the day, right? And if that means that the client needs to run on their own 2 feet, then they need to run on their own 2 feet, and that's a goal, right? And that's the goal that we need to put in place with clients. And I think there's definitely a drive insofar as in-house legal goes and in-house risk management and IT and InfoSec go for self-sufficiency and less reliance on consultants and less reliance on external firms.
Yes.
And that's part of our service offering. And I've integrated that very, very fundamentally as part of our strategy, because you don't swim against the tide.
Yeah.
We understand that our clients are looking to reduce. It's funnily enough, I noticed less of a reducing costs and more of a reducing reliance.
Yeah.
And that's why I come into as the most trusted advisor. Well, that's again the most trusted advisor strategy that we're putting in place, where we're not looking at giving you a 80% discount as compared to a law firm, but you're certainly going to get 80% better value out of what you're paying.
Got you. And again, Brendon, I think it's a great, it forms so nicely part of the overall business strategy, right? The more we can empower and augment our clients, whether it is through a consulting engagement or through a technology engagement, at the end of the day, it's all about empowering them, right? And I think that also goes to the greater ethos of our group company. Again, I'm going to highlight, where we've got 30,000 students on our books, and we're really looking at social responsibility and how we can bring those people up a level. So again, it's nice to hear that. So, I mean, whereabouts, I mean, what is the jurisdiction that you're effectively working in at this point in time? So we've got 3 primary jurisdictions where we advise in, and we've got experience in, and that's South Africa and some of sub-Saharan Africa, which I sort of include as one jurisdiction, as Africa, yeah. And then the EU and the UK. We find that when it comes to the US, which is an area we don't operate in, we've got experience in Privacy Shield, or lack thereof, as of late. Their latest legislation and what's coming. But I think fundamentally, the African and European models are philosophically aligned, so it fits better with our core facet. But you can't ignore the fact that America is the largest economy in the world. So you have to be au fait with that, even if you can't advise on that strategy. Yeah. So look, for everybody, obviously that's tuning into our community or joining for the first time, our details are available on advance.tech. Brendon's contact details are there for you. We plan to ensure that this community shares value. So Brendon is available if there are any questions that you may have, and more importantly, if they're in engagement. But Brendon, thank you very much. I think the insights are great. I think it's, the power of 3 makes a lot more sense when we're engaging with customers. We don't have to outsource services to some other person, and ultimately we can actually help the customer through a journey. So thank you for your time. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jason. I appreciate
no worries. The interview. Yeah, anytime. So I think for those of you that are tuning in for the first time, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We've got one more division in our business to go. Unfortunately, it is mine. And again, the more time you spend in front of YouTube, the more time it's difficult to interview yourself. So watch out for our cybersecurity interview. And then we're going to head on over to some of our trusted customers and leaders in their part of the world, being cybersecurity, data analytics, and privacy. And we're going to give you some insight into their businesses and what challenges they face, and hopefully bring you along with the ride. So again, Brendon, thank you so much. Everybody tuning in, thank you. We look forward to chatting to you soon.